Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Katrina and this is so I just finished The Craziest Book and I'm gonna have to spoil it to talk about it. So if you want to read The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. Sometimes this name is spelled Katrina. This is Katrina. And the narrator says Katrina. So I don't know if it's Katrina or Katrina. I should have looked that up before getting on here. I normally do a lot of research. I'm really into what the author has to say, what other people have to say about it. And I have an Own Voices review of this that I still want to look at, and I will post it. I will link it in the description. I haven't watched it yet, but this person has the disorder that this book touches on and talks about it. So I haven't watched it yet, like I said, because I wanted to rush on here and talk about it. I have a short period of time before the kids come in and it's bedtime routine and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to talk about this book and get this video done. So The Last House on Needless Street, let me read the description. This is a story of a serial killer, a stolen child, revenge, death, and an ordinary house at the end of an ordinary street. All of these things are true, and yet they're all lies. You think you know what's inside The Last House on Needless Street. You think you've read this story before. That's where you're wrong. In the dark forest at the end of Needless Street lies something buried, but it's not what you think. Now, this is the most accurate description ever. And so I don't even know what I've rated this yet. And the review that I left was just I don't even know. I don't know yet how to rate this. So let me try to give you a baseline read of the book, and then you can go away if you want to read this book and then come back and you can watch the rest of the video, and then we can discuss this in the discussion box. My oldest child says that I sound like a boomer when I say discussion box or comment box.
I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care.
Let me tell you something.
We don't care.
And I hear that every time now. But anyway, in the discussion, the comment section, we can discuss what the heck went on in this book. So there's a character, Ted, and in Ted's house, Ted's very messy house, there is a cat named Olivia, who we actually hear the point of view from. The cat is religious. The cat feels that God has put her on this world to take care of Ted. Ted is an alcoholic. Ted just doesn't take care of himself. He's slovenly. Ted loses time. There is also a daughter that Ted has that he sees once a week named Lauren. Lauren has lots of issues. She is violent and angry, and Ted tries to accommodate her, and sometimes he yells and punishes her, or will not allow her to come visit him sometimes for a month or so if he's really angry, and he feels bad about that, and he tries to make amends sometimes. There's also, the further the book goes along, you realize Ted is also dealing with something in his memory. That's Ted. Then there's this girl, Dee, who moves in next door to Ted, and we come to find out that Dee believes that Ted is the person who stole her sister. Her sister went missing when they were young, and they went to the beach. Her mother, father, herself, and her younger sister went to the beach, and her sister was stolen from the beach. Her mother died, and her father left, and Dee was left all alone, and it became an obsession for Dee to find out who stole her sister. So we see that Dee is trying to push herself into Ted's life, and she watches him and all that kind of stuff. All the while, we're getting lots of weird points of view from Ted and these different interactions that he has when he sees his therapist, who he calls the bug man. And he tries very hard to, for some reason, we don't know why, we assume that the reason why he is hiding his daughter is because his daughter is actually Lulu, who is Dee's lost sister. We assume that as readers, we're led to believe that. And so he goes to his therapist and tries to get medicines. Well, he tries to talk to the therapist, wants to talk to him about his problems, but he has to try to pretend and keep his therapist out of his mind so that he can help his daughter. And so he's always saying things that his daughter has said to him to try to get advice on how to help her. And the therapist is real cagey. We just assume that he is a serial killer. He stole Lulu. He has, when he goes to the forest, he's visiting his other graves, the graves of other people he stole, things like that. So that's kind of it's a little bit of a spoilery, probably, because you probably should go into this just not knowing anything like I did. Although it was almost like a mental strain to not look up something about it, to just allow myself to, because it was so weird. It was so bizarre. And so it was a real mental strain for me to just kind of trust the people that I knew. I like their channels. Gabby reads and Books and Lala. I trust that they, Books and Lala likes weird books, but Gabby is a little bit more middle of the road, more mainstream. And so those two together, I thought, okay, let me just trust the process and read this book and try to get past the almost discomfort, because it's so bizarre at first, right? So that's basically I guess our baseline. So if that sounds like something you want to talk about, then stop here, read the book, and then come back. Otherwise, if you don't care and you just want to hear the rest of my thoughts on this crazy book, then let's go forward. Spoilers from here on out. Sorry for the sound quality change. I couldn't go without the air conditioning, so I put it on low, and I did the sound check and it still sounds like it's blasting forever, like blasting loudly. So I am sorry. I was just sweating. And so the story is, like, as I'm reading, I started to think this sounds a lot like, spoilers for the movie Identity that came out like 20 years ago, but it started to sound like the movie Identity, where that movie was a serial killer on the loose. There was all these people who were stuck in a motel in a storm, and there was multiple different types of people. There was a weird, like, obvious person that you think is the killer. There was John Cusack, who was the lead guy. There was, there were women, there were all these people, and they start dying, and they're trying to figure out why they're dying. They come to find out it's all in the guy's head. So I started to get vibes from that, like, okay, so this is going to be a multiple personality story. Let me, so I'm like, okay, but how does the cat fit in? How does Dee fit in, the next door neighbor who is looking for her missing sister? How does all this fit together? We kept taking weird, I kept trying to figure out where he was, because when we were in Ted's point of view, he would all of a sudden start talking like a little boy talking to his mom, and then we would just kind of slip into a memory of him with his mother. And he would even say it like that. He would say there was memories all over the house, or the rugs would change different colors. Like, the rug would at one point be, the color he hated was blue, and then the rug changed into an orange color that both he and Olivia liked. I didn't pick up on the fact that both he and Olivia liked that rug color. And so that didn't lead me to realize that Olivia was one of his personalities. I just kept wondering, okay, how does Olivia fit in? Like, is it, again, I just kept thinking that the author needed a neutral view on Ted and the neighbor and the situation. So when Ted would go to his therapy appointments, he would hide all of his concerns in these hypotheticals, and more as the therapy goes along, the therapist gets annoyed with that, and he's just like, you know what, he starts getting really harsh with him toward the end of the book, and he's like, you don't have a daughter, do you? And if you're gay, just say you're gay, because one of the things that he comes in and talks about is he's concerned that the cat is gay, because Olivia likes to stare out the window at this cat that passes the house at the same time every day. It's a female cat, and so he's stressed about the cat being gay, and he's like, what? The therapist is like, if you're gay, it's fine, like, just, you know. And so that was weird, once that, you know, because we're going through this whole thing where we're given just as much time in the cat's mind as we are in Ted's mind, a little bit less so in Lauren's mind, which is his daughter, because a lot of time Lauren gets sent away. Lauren throws fits, and we see Lauren a lot more actually through Ted's point of view, and I guess this should have hit me. It just hit me just now that we don't really see Lauren and Olivia at the same time, and it's even told later on that they're both put in the box at different times. It still didn't click that they were two different versions of the same person, because they're put in this unused broken freezer, and that has the holes drilled in the top, and then there's weird smells like spoiled milk, and Lauren's feet don't work, and we think that, you know, at the beginning of the story we think Ted did that to keep her from running away. So like her feet, she's remembering times where she did something wrong or she screamed, and so to break her down, Ted pours boiling water in on her, in through the holes, and when he takes her out and deals with her burned feet and everything, if she yells back at him or displeases him in any other kind of way, then he pours vinegar into the blankets that line the freezer and then put her back in there. So then you find out that in all actuality that all happened to Ted. Ted is not a serial killer. He has not killed or kidnapped anyone. And Dee is just obsessed with him because he's odd. And Dee actually is the reason why her sister went missing. She took her sister for a walk and ended up meeting up with a boy. She was frustrated. She didn't like her sister because her sister was the favorite. She was annoyed with her, just like the dynamic between lots of younger and older siblings, except this had just a deadly outcome, because as Dee was flirting around with the boy, Lulu, her sister, went off and got injured and was in and out of the water. Dee thought she was dead. Dee ran away and went to the bathroom and tried to like get rid of any evidence. And we see this incident from Dee's point of view innocently in the beginning of the book, but then we see it again from the other point of view toward the end. So no one is a reliable narrator. So then we realize, when she goes to try to, what scares her away from trying to save her sister is a snake. And so then she runs into the bathroom and she's freaking out and she's cleaning the blood off of herself. And then she kind of like snaps to and is like, okay, I need to go get my sister. I need to go help my sister. And in that short period of time, she goes back out and finds her sister gone. And then, you know, there's no evidence because Dee had cleaned up all the evidence before she kind of snapped out of like her sister's flip-flops. She put in somebody else's backpack, beach bag and all this kind of stuff. So there was no blood, there was no shoe, there was no evidence. And then Dee's brain just kind of broke and she forgot that part of it. Like her brain protected her from that. And so then she did end up going on and having that tragic life her mother died and then her father just left. And so that we get that point of view, and then we'll come back to her in a minute. And so then with the therapist, we come to find out that the therapist is not helping him, not helping Ted. He knows exactly what's going on with Ted, and as the book goes along, he gets more and more harsh with Ted. And like I said, he goes, I know you don't have a daughter. You need to, open up to me. You don't have any reasons to not open up to me, and all this kind of stuff. And it freaks Ted out. And then one day Ted is at the gay bar. He's like, oh, I just, he told the therapist that he goes there just because he likes being there. He's not aware that he's gay. So he is at the bar and he runs into the therapist, and the therapist sees him in the, they run into each other in the bathroom, and he's like, oh, it's really weird to see you here, and all this kind of stuff. And then come to find, Ted is aware that, oh, wait a minute, why are you here? Are you following me? And he come to find out that the therapist knows exactly where he lives. He follows him, all this kind of stuff. And he says, I just let me write a book about you. Let me see the other personalities. I'd like to write a book about you. And the therapist is saying like, oh, whatever happened, we never find this out, but he goes, I got my license back from the time that I messed up, and all these other people that I went to school with, they're successful and they have books. I deserve that too. You can be my ticket, and you can get fame too, and get a better life for yourself as well. And Ted just cuts him off and runs away from him. And at one point we get into we get into Lauren's point of view, and we spend the most time with her, and it gets really strange at that point. So Olivia is talking to herself, and she is, multiple times in the beginning, she's admitted that she'll say something to Lauren or to mostly Ted, and she knows that Ted can't hear her. And the audiobook is funny because you hear the cat making cat noises all throughout the story, and as well as read Bible verses. And so at one point Lauren responds to a question or a statement that Olivia says, and Olivia freaks out like, wait a minute, why can you hear me? Why can you understand what I'm saying? And Lauren says, why, kind of like, and so she tries to get her to think about it. It takes a long time to get Olivia to realize that they're the same person. And then Lauren tries to convince Olivia that Ted is a bad guy. Olivia won't hear of it. And finally, with the way that Lauren twists things, she is able to convince Olivia, the cat, that Ted is, crazy, going to kill them, or going to kill Lauren, and please help her, And so at one point, when the storyline of the therapist crosses over with the real life of Ted at the bar, Ted freaks out and it's like, okay, I gotta go. And so he leaves. He packs up everything. He leaves to go to the forest, and he digs up a knife because Lauren has tried to kill him with the knife before. So he digs up the knife that he was keeping outside, goes off. Dee is watching him, so she's going and she's spraying the trees as she's going in so she can find her way back out. And we're going back and forth between these two points of view. And then the cat, so Lauren is like bullying the cat. She's like, focus, you are not a cat, like take the knife and stab him, and she keeps saying, oh, I can't have these ugly human hands, I have beautiful furry velvety hands. It's just, so she finally gets her to stab Ted in the gut, and it just all comes together. Dee shows up and finds him writhing in pain, finds Ted writhing in pain, and Ted speaks in the girl's voice that Dee had heard multiple times when she had kind of like snuck up to the house and stuff like that. There was times where Ted has found notes in his pocket talking about murders and things like that. That's been from the Lauren personality. There was times where Dee was watching the house and saw a cassette tape come out of the mail slot, and the voice sounded like a little girl's voice. And it's so believable because I thought that there were multiple people narrating. There's one person narrating, and you hear a girl's voice, you hear Ted's voice, you hear an evil cat voice, because I haven't even talked about the night cat, the night, I think he's called just the night, and it's the cat that splits off from Olivia, because when Ted would leave for a long time and Olivia would be hungry, Olivia couldn't bring herself to kill a mice or a squirrel or anything, so the night cat would do it, and Olivia would wake back up and be full. I don't know why it didn't click even then that if the cat has split personality, maybe the cat is part of Ted too, because who would think a cat would be part of Ted? So Dee comes up, she sees what's going on. That's when we get the point of view of the backstory of what really happened with Lulu. Lulu was left there, and this is where it gets a little more unbelievable, like in the logic of the story, in the world of the story, because I actually thought that multiple personalities had been debunked, like that wasn't a real thing, but it's changed the name. It's just so it's DID. Let me look that up.
According to Cleveland Clinic, dissociative identity disorder.
Yes, so it's DID, dissociative identity disorder, a mental health condition where people with dissociative identity disorder have two or more separate personalities. These identities control the person's behavior at different times. So they changed the name in 1994, so it's still there. I don't know why I had in my mind that it was completely debunked. Maybe the whole idea of Sybil, maybe that was completely debunked. The author talked about talking to actual people with it and doing research and wanting, again, to correct a lot of the media harm that had been done in talking about people with this disorder. Because in the end, Ted ended up rescued by a forest ranger who was led there by Dee's marking the trees, and was able to get him into the hospital, get ambulance and everything out there, got the story. The forest worker was able to, the forest preserve guy was able to he believed Ted, as Ted told him his whole story, and they fell in love and had a relationship. So Ted got a happy ending and got a better therapist, and it wasn't all happy-go-lucky with the therapist, because number one, he didn't trust. He had to build trust up again. He actually said that, and this good therapist understood that and said, okay, I understand that, but and he said, I also can't, and he told him, the medicines that you were getting, the reason why they didn't quite work is because he was giving you out-of-date medicines, and that's the reason why he was giving them to you and not sending you to a pharmacy. And so he was doing everything wrong. That therapist was doing everything wrong. And he said that that's the reason why he gained all the weight and stuff like that. And I know that experience. I have bipolar disorder, and the very first medicine I was put on was a very strong medicine that called Seroquel, and it caused me to gain an immense amount of weight, and it pushed me into diabetes. I was pre-diabetic, but it pushed me, because I had, with my last baby, I had gestational diabetes, and I had been on bed rest, and I never quite recovered from that. I had a deep depressive episode, and I didn't recover quite to my more active. I've always been chunky, but I've been active and things like that, and it kept things away. Like people would every time I would go to the doctor, they were like, oh, your blood pressure is fine, oh, you don't have diabetes. And it was because I was active and I ate halfway decent. But after that last difficult pregnancy and then that depressive thing afterwards, then I had a full-on break, and that medicine that they gave me, that really, really strong medicine, it made me gain a whole lot of weight. it took a lot of creativity out of me. It just like drained. And it's an old, I finally kind of had to advocate for myself to get on something else. And so now I'm on Depakote, which is a newer version of medicine for bipolar disorder, and it doesn't have the crazy side effects that Seroquel does. And I actually keep Seroquel because I do have delusions sometimes when stress gets really bad. I've only had one in a couple years, but if stress happens really bad, I could sometimes slip into having a delusion. And a delusion is when you see something, you know it's not real, but it like my delusion sometimes is that my eye is really large, and it's like creepily large, and it will freak me out. I'll get goosebumps. It'll be really painful goosebumps. I'll get nauseous and things like that, and it just messes with my mind because I know my eye is not that big. I can feel it. I just mentally know it, but I see it, and so I have to do all these the therapist will have me take a selfie, and then everyone around me has to, even my kids, my daughter will have to look at the selfie sometimes and say, yes, Mom, your eye is not swollen, just to kind of like back up what I already know. So I don't have hallucinations. Hallucinations are when people live in that. So I would say like Ted was having hallucinations when he would see, I don't know if the other personality would be considered a hallucination, so I'm not going to speak on that. But a hallucination is when someone lives in it and they can't tell the difference. So a delusion is when you can tell the difference, but you still see it, and so you have to like combat that. You have to combat it in a certain way. Whereas a hallucination is I would be just living, and no one would be able to convince me that my eye was not as big as what and so. And I also have the Seroquel will take that away, but then I'll just have to deal with the side effects of the draining away of creativity and the color in the world and stuff. This got serious, but it was a very fun, weird, and then in the end, illuminating look at a very, still to this day, a very misunderstood disorder, but at the same time I still was able to see myself, my experiences, and relate to that, and see someone seeing me, even tangentially. And that's one of the things you want to get empathy. So I have empathy for someone who is going through that, but also sometimes you want to find someone having empathy for you, the reader, and I appreciated that. I appreciated that I still, even a person like myself who is, at that intersection of the lesser, right? The person who is not seen as beautiful because I'm fat, because lesser because I'm black, dark skinned, mentally ill, all those things. I still had the same prejudice toward Ted. I was convinced that Ted was even as I was still thinking that he might be mentally ill, it still didn't occur to me that he could be the victim. He could be the misunderstood person. Even as I was still convinced that that was going to be the twist, that it was going to be multiple personalities, that did not preclude him from being the bad guy to me. And so that's another interesting point of view from this. So let me know what you think about this. If you've read the book, let's talk. I have no idea how clear I was. I tried my best to be linear, but this book doesn't lend itself to linear retelling or repeating because it's not quite linear itself. The reason why it's kind of difficult for me to give it a score is because it did surprise me. It was different, but it was still, like I said at the beginning, I had such a block to enjoying the book. I was very if people who were talking about it, if I didn't want to watch their live, and if I didn't trust that they combined had my taste, then I would not have stuck with it. I would have probably DNF'd because it was quite difficult to get through it. And by the time I was realizing, I was like, okay, I'm interested, I wanted to stick through. So I had that intrigue. I wanted to stick with it. I still didn't quite enjoy the book. it was difficult. It was difficult to listen to the mother. Once we got a background on the mom ended up being the person who, again, stole Lulu and was killing other children. She had worked in a hospital and got fired because she was killing people. They moved because of that. So we find out that the mother was the abuser, and she killed herself. And so she killed herself, and Ted had to bury her in the forest. I don't know quite what happened to the therapist. Did he die? That's not clear. And then there's some things that are just kind of left there. Who were the people in the attic? Who were the boys in the attic? Who I guess Knight was another personality. But are you saying that personalities can also split and have their own personality, and that wasn't fully looked into? It was just another kind of dropped plot point, and it was just unpleasant to be in the mother's point of view. The book wasn't pleasant, so I couldn't say I enjoyed it, but it just gave me a ton to think about. I still want to keep talking about it. I want to, I think it's called Chaotic Book Nook. Let me look this up really fast. I have it saved to my watch later. I'm going to watch her point of view because she's actually an Own Voices reviewer of this. It's the Chaotic Little Book Corner. She has a Last House on Neela Street spoiler review, and she has that. She also has other videos where she is talking about living with DID, and so it's important that there are Own Voices reviewers so that we can understand what the author got right or wrong, and that's important. Even, I think, last thing, it's important for people to have proper representation, because I know the first time I had a delusion, I remember freaking out and going, okay, am I really crazy now? Like, I know I live with a mental illness, but now am I really crazy? Because that seemed to be over the line. And the therapist was like, I don't quite know what you mean. Like, what do you mean by crazy? Is it something you see in the media that's making you? She said, I know people who have full-on hallucinations and live with them and still have productive lives. So do you think that you have a mental illness? We have to deal with this and manage it, and so it made me, because of crazy meant something different to me. Delusion meant something different. It wasn't just a technical term. And I remember learning that there's, like, I told her I had chills, and she was like, well, if you have chills, it's a physical thing, you need to go to the hospital. If you have goosebumps, that is, related to what you're going through mentally. I didn't even know that there was that differentiation between the symptoms, the side effects. Like, so the media is not going to teach us. So it is important to have someone who's giving their point of view, and also to educate ourselves, because even myself, who has been in therapy my entire adult life, and I read a lot, I am constantly questioning the medicines I'm on. My therapist and my primary care manager, they tease me about it sometimes. They talk to each other, and they also tell me to sometimes I need to stop Googling. And so even with that, I still don't know everything. I still come up against things that are brand new, even with managing this illness all this time. So anytime that we can talk about mental health and the different versions of it, have people talk about their points of view, and have this much conversation sparked about it, and hopefully that conversation pushes people to look for real answers. So let me know if you've read the book. Have I convinced you to read the book? If you read the book, what did you think? Do you have any answers for some of the questions I had? Like, what ended up happening to the therapist? Did I just miss what happened to him? Did I miss what happened with the people, with the boys in the attic? Were you just as kind of put off by being pulled out of the kind of fantastical mind of Ted and having to deal with the more down the line, like normal thriller of Dee's life. Were you at all surprised? Did you clock everything? At what point did you clock things? Let's talk about this down in the description box. Parker, I'll be a boomer is a description box. Oh, no, it's not even a description box. The comment box. I'm trying to be a smart aleck and I can't even get it right. Down in the comment box, comment section, let's talk this out. Let's see. What kind of emoji can we do that is not disrespectful, but that is related to this video? Let's just do the one that's like this. So let's put that emoji at the end of this. If you don't have anything to say, but you just wanted to give a sacrifice to the YouTube gods, be easy on yourself, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.